My name is Avi Banerjee. This upcoming year, I will be a junior at Mission San Jose High School in Fremont, California. Ever since I was little, I've always been researching and learning ways to protect the environment. I looked up the kinds of work that they do here at the Colorado School of Mines, and it really interested me. I decided to apply for an internship. Come inside, and I'll show you the kinds of things that I got to learn throughout my stay. The Colorado School of Mines was founded in 1870 in Golden, Colorado. It is one of the leading research universities in the fields of engineering and applied sciences. In their state-of-the-art CESEP, Center for Experimental Study of Subsurface Environmental Processes Lab, graduate students study complex subsurface systems, primarily regarding water and environmental quality.
My name is Professor T.C. Langasekara. I'm a faculty member at Colorado School of Mines in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department, and also the director of a Center for Experimental Study of Subsurface Environmental Processes. So in this lab we do very large-scale physical models to understand subsurface flow and transport problems, which are applicable to many disciplines. For example, we do research on cleaning up underground contaminant plumes. We do research on carbon sequestration. We do research on migration of methane gases from fracking, and many others. So I'm sure that you will talk to my students and they will give you a much better background on what we do. So this is, for example, it's funded by the Department of Defense, where we are trying to understand how chemical vapor migrates into buildings, and when the chemical vapor goes into buildings, it has health implications. So we are trying to develop some guidelines using models, so that when we go to this type of sites, we have a problem of vapor intrusion, they should be able to come out with solutions and get away to many of these sites. So this is a research project we are doing actually for two agencies, Department of Energy and National Science Foundation, to fundamentally understand how to store sequestrated CO2 gas underground. So this tank actually is trying to model a situation where you have an inject fluids which sort of behaves like CO2 liquid, and then we put it in these tanks, and then we have special equipment to use the X-ray system we use to actually measure the saturations of these fluids underneath. So once you get this data from this type of tank experiment, then we validate Department of Energy models which are used to design these schemes. So these new labs, the other lab, most of the tanks we saw, we were trying to understand what's happening in the ground. So the first time, there are many problems which are of interest to us in USA and around the world, which are related to things happening at the land, at the atmospheric interface. So for example, things like climate change and all this are tied to evaporation from soils, and then we are also interested in leakage of gases. So this particular facility allows us to actually look at this land atmospheric interface to generate data, again to validate the models, and the models hopefully will help us to look at these real world problems which are of a lot of importance from a climate change point of view. As you see, this is still under construction, but the facility is all done, but now we are assembling different parts. But you see here, the two basic components. What you see up here is the wind tunnel, and then what you see here, so the wind tunnel basically is designed to simulate what's happened in the atmosphere. So for example, we can simulate the wind velocity, we can simulate temperatures outside, so we can cool and warm it, we can go to sub-freezing temperatures to look at really cold climates. And this particular room where we are sitting is actually insulated, so we can isolate this test area from the rest of the lab. So what you see here is a tank, which is a soil tank. It's under construction. Once these things go in, create a tank which is not leaking, and we fill it soils. And you have all sorts of sensors to measure the temperature, soil moisture, and chemical concentration, etc. And then once you fill the tank can be moved underneath this, and it's sitting on the side of the jacks, and you can move it up, and then it will fit exactly here. So once this is all in place, then we put this flow down, and then we can go up here and take the readings, and we can take the readings down here, and all the controls are outside, and you can gather data. So this is a very unique research facility, which will be really exciting for some of the students from high schools to come here and learn these things, and then they can go to schools like this and do this type of research.
This is the Colorado School of Mines wind tunnel. In this wind tunnel, they can simulate a variety of different climates. Unlike the CESEP lab, where they only study subsurface activity, the wind tunnel serves as a tool to bridge the gap between the subsurface and climate above. Students can come here, place their tanks with subsurface experiments, and see how the climate above affects the variables they are observing in their tanks.
Hello, my name is Mike Clampin. I'm a PhD student at the Colorado School of Mines. I work in the Center for Experimental Study of Subsurface Environmental Processes under Dr. Tisa Langasekara. And I study the effects of carbon sequestration on shallow subsurface environments. These days, a lot of companies and government agencies are trying to figure out ways to combat climate change and to mitigate the effects of greenhouse gas emissions from factories and coal-fired power plants. So one strategy they've come up with is geologic carbon sequestration, where you take CO2 and pressurize it and inject it deep beneath the Earth's surface, hoping that it'll stay there for thousands of years and not pollute the atmosphere and thus not add to the greenhouse effect. My project focuses on the potential impacts that geologic carbon sequestration could have on shallow subsurface aquifers that we could use potentially for drinking water resources. When CO2 is stored deep beneath the Earth's surface, it's buoyant, it wants to travel upward because it's lighter than water. And if it finds a route to do so, it can potentially reach the shallow subsurface. In that case, it will be either dissolved or gaseous. And so my project focuses on the transition from dissolved CO2 to gaseous CO2 and how that's affected by various conditions like temperature, pressure, and heterogeneity of the soils. So this column here is the simplest of my experiments. It has just one single interface between two types of soils, and then I inject water that's been saturated with CO2 gas into the bottom of the column, and as it travels up, bubbles form, just like when you open soda. Those bubbles will form and they'll move through the porous structure of the sand or the rocks, and this is affected by the sizes of the pores and the sizes of the soil grains, and also the configuration of the heterogeneous packing. So I have this small column where I look at that at a pretty small scale, and then I upscale my findings to more realistic scenarios using bigger systems, such as this rectangular column here, where I have a curved interface between two sands, and these sensors allow me to detect when gas phase forms and when how much forms and where it goes after it forms. And eventually I will move into an even bigger scale in this large two-dimensional tank here, where I can have a background water flow gradient, and again I'll inject CO2 saturated water and see how the gas phase forms, where the gas phase accumulates, and how much it leaves to the atmosphere, which is really one of the biggest concerns of leakage from a geologic sequestration site. Because if you're putting the gas underneath the ground in order for it to not get into the atmosphere, then you obviously don't want it to escape from the ground back into the atmosphere. So my project will help us to predict those types of events and hopefully help in risk assessment studies for sequestration projects. So that it'll hopefully help companies to choose sites where the effects of leakage will be less hazardous than other sites.
Graduate student Michael Plampin's experiment focuses on the potential impact of subsurface CO2 leaking upwards into shallow subsurface aquifers, contaminating the groundwater. His setup involves a tall, narrow tank packed with layers of different sands. He pumps dissolved CO2 into the bottom of the tank and studies the transition between dissolved CO2 and gaseous CO2, and sees how it's affected by various conditions including temperature, pressure, and soil mixture. While working in the CESEP lab, I was able to assist grad students with their projects. I helped them by building sensors, monitoring various data, and constructing a new tank. My stay at Mines has taught me so much, and thanks to Professor Longer Sacra and various graduate students, I learned invaluable lessons.